Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. This lodge meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on some aspects of the astral body. And next week will be the White Lotus Day, which is the commemoration of H.P. Blavatsky. We also meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. The United Lodge of Theosophists is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave at the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles, through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is the form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. Today's reading comes from the Voice of the Silence. Search for the paths, but, O Lanu, be of clean heart before thou startest on thy journey. Before thou takest thy first step, learn to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the eye from the heart doctrine. Yea, ignorance is like unto a closed and airless vessel, the soul a bird shut up within. It warbles not, nor can stir a feather, but the songster, mute and torpid, sits, and of exhaustion dies. But even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it. The seeds of wisdom cannot sprout and grow in airless space. To live and reap experience, the mind needs breadth and depth, and points to draw it towards the diamond soul. Seek not those points in Maya's realm, but soar beyond illusions. Search the eternal and the changeless Sat, mistrusting fancies, false suggestions. For mind is like a mirror, it gathers dust while it reflects. It needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek, O beginner, to blend thy mind and soul. Shun ignorance, and likewise shun illusion. Avert thy face from world deceptions. Mistrust thy senses, they are false. But within thy body, the shrine of thy sensations, seek in the impersonal for the eternal man, and having sought him out, look inward. Thou art Buddha. And now for today's talk.
Welcome to all of you. this philosophy that came out at the end of the 19th century is still being promulgated as it was given by the original agents of the Master's Lodge. The nomenclature, terminology that was presented to us requires a little bit of an explanation, because HPB said that Sanskrit terms have a inner meaning that correspond to our sheaths. In other words, we're made of 7 layers as a human being, and these 7 layers need to be understood, because if we give powers or characteristics to the sheaths that are wrong, then we will not get the right understanding of the philosophy that was presented. As I see newcomers, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the terminology, so we'll just go briefly over them and make it a little bit clearer for you. The 5 years of Theosophy has this explanation in it, and it is recommended for everybody to read it so that we can stay with the same terms. And she asks that they not be changed, so that clarity remains with us and that we understand what we are talking about. As we are all aware, we have a physical body, and the physical body is the external sheath, all of the rest of them being within. Physical body is the only concrete one that is visible to the eye. After this, we have the astral body, and this is given different names. The Hindus call it the Bhut or Bhuta. Sanskrit terminology is Linga Sarira. So if you see it, you need to understand that it means the same thing. And HPB herself uses ethereal in some places in the secret doctrine. So ethereal, astral, linga sarira, they all mean the same thing. Now, at the beginning of this manvantara, before we were clothed with a skin, astral body was the external body, because we were ethereal, and only in the middle of the 3rd round we developed a skin, solidifying as we progressed. And we need to be reminded that this is the 4th round. We are the 5th sub-race of the 5th root. So this is just setting it up. Now, in the psychology of the East, all of these sheaths are understood, and the different aspects of the philosophy which is given all add to one another. It does not take away from anything, it just adds to it. In other words, if you add all of them together, then you will get the synthesis of the 5 or 7 sheaths. Now, we also talked about jiva, and you cannot really separate jiva or prana, which is breath, from the astral body, because jiva is the one that actually animates or gives its life. This is the life principle in the theosophical parlance. After that, we have the mind. Then we have buddhi, which is the spiritual soul. And then we have atma, which is the spirit. Now, in the religious terminology, these two are not really differentiated or given their true place in the psychology of man. Having said that, we're all aware what the physical body is. We have brain, nerves, bones, lymph, muscles, organs of sensation. We have a skin covering everything. So the unseen physical man then would be the astral body. Now, the astral body is in conjunction with the prana or life principle, gives us this existence on earth. So if you give these characteristics to the physical body does not have anything in it except if the astral body wasn't there and did not energize it, the physical body could not exist. Now you have to reverse your psychology a little bit, because the inner man is the one that energizes the physical body. And as said, the Hindus call it Bhuta, and you need to know that too. It gets a little bit so in other words, they call it a devil, because once it is separated from the mind and the inner aspect of the human soul, which is based on ethical and moral conduct, it truly becomes wicked sometimes. Now, in the mother that is going to have a child, the astral body is the model body, because it is present. If it wasn't present, the molecules could not assemble themselves to give a body to the growing child in the womb. So we need to keep that in mind. So the design body explains how in the growing baby, how the eyes are pushed out from inside. These are all genetically connected to one another, but without the astral or the ethereal body, it could not take place. And when deformation occurs, it's the astral body that is deformed, because at that stage of development, the mind or the imagination of the mother has tremendous sway on the developing body of that baby in the womb. So sometimes we see birthmarks. It's because of the imagination of the mother that birthmark actually gets imprinted onto the growing baby in the womb. So it is said that this body cannot be hurt by the scalpel, because it is not of this world. What is it made up of? It's electromagnetic. We can take this out. It is electromagnetic. So its nature then is electromagnetic, but nevertheless it is substantial. What is it made up of? Well, in this terminology, electrons and atoms are concurrently used, but she is not talking about the atoms of the physics aspect of it. These atoms were explained in a previous talk, but we will get back to it again probably sometime in the future. So what is electricity? When we look at it, it is free-flowing electrons, is it not? These are free-flowing. So they're electrons. They're free. But the difference between the electrons that are freely flowing and the astral body is that it has a form, it has a shape. So the electrons are actually confined to that form. They're in the model body according to defining components of that astral body. The astral body has its nervous system, it has a vascular system, it is fluidic. It is fluidic. In other words, what the blood is to the physical body, the fluidic aspect of this body is to it. So it has a circulatory system. And it is fed by the electromagnetic atmosphere of our sun, which gives light, which is free-flowing electrons. So when we talk about the human kingdom, all and every human being has an astral body. But not only does the humans have it, but all of the animals and all of the plant life also has their ethereal double. Other than that, nothing could come into the world with a shape and form that is solidified, and that is how each plant actually produces its own kind, because of the model body being there and the molecular structure of that physical aspect being able to arrange itself on that form. So if the physical body has marks on it, so will the astral body. And as said, the scalpel does not affect it. What affects it? Electricity does. So if we are doing electrical surgery, then it will affect the astral body. When discussing pain, where is it stored, for instance? Why do we feel it? We feel it because of the astral body. Can we take it off now? I'll put some more stuff up here. Dis-ease or disease, emotions are all stored in the astral body. That ethereal body is a repository of disease as well as emotion. Now, we also know in the Theosophical philosophy that this actually starts in the mind first, but slowly it sifts itself into the astral body, and the last place it exhibits itself is in the physical body. But the root of the disease is in the astral body. And we'll go, excuse me, go here. It says here, what causes pain? Why is it that we feel it? Pain is never felt except when an intensity of sensation is reached such that disintegration, incipient or actual, of some physical organ or tissue is reached. In other words, there is a sufficiently violent vibration in the body that will tear that body apart. But why should the invisible lines binding that material, which is stretched beyond a degree, should be felt by the person? Because it is stated that the magnetic binding power is in the ether. This is not the ether of the scientific world. Ether refers to the astral light. Which is everywhere, and we kind of swim in it. So this astral light is everywhere around us. And the pain of stressed tissue in the body would mean nothing to the consciousness of man were it not for that electromagnetic pattern form with its nerves and sensibilities. If it didn't have it, we would not feel it. So, the pain is a psychic and not a physical matter, is easily demonstrated. The astral body, then, with its principles, conveys that stretching or unusual vibration to the mind, and then the mind, in turn, conveys it to the secondless and the supreme abiding perspective power, which is the highest. We called it Atman, or the spirit. So there's correspondence between all these sheets. Just because we are made up of 7 principles, it doesn't mean our principles are all having fun separately. We're a synthetic unit, and they work all together. And it says that the scalpel wounds heal at 97.5%, whereas the electrical ones 60%. The electrical wounds do not develop the same strength as the other wounds for 21 days. There is an article by HBB and explained by Mr. Judge where he says that even anger shatters the astral body, and it takes quite a long time for it to rearrange itself into the molecular unit of the form that it represents. So we need to be aware as to these organized electrons in the astral body, and protect them from dispersion, in other words. So the imagination has power over it in the womb, and the electricity on the outside has a similar effect on its constitution. So, as long as the double man, and we have to say this because we truly are double, in the sense that here is an inner astral model that is invisible to the eye, and of course the physical science does not accept this philosophy, but as long as they don't accept it, they will never ever be able to come to a true understanding of biology, or embryology for that matter, because it is necessary to give these sheaths their proper place. Our psychology is in shambles too, because the East understand the 7 principles and their psychology is based on it. But in the West we're lacking, because our scientific world still are behind in their understanding of these sheaths. So if we look at humanity in general terms, there is always, from antiquity to now, there has always been that inner feeling that there's a personal spiritual entity within the personal physical man. Nowhere in our historical development has that not been around. Even the simplest human being knows that he or she is not just a physical body, even though today that physical body is aggrandized beyond its limitations because so much attention has been given to it. The physical body has to be kept in good order because it is the highest temple of the spiritual entity within. But beyond that, it really has no significance. It's the inner man with the mind that needs to be understood. Emotions. The reading this morning referred to illusion. illusion. The physical world, in a sense, is illusionary because it is only relative existence that it expresses. The inner man, the higher triad, which is the individuality, is the one that goes from life to life to life. Anyone who studies this philosophy will not understand it unless karma and reincarnation is accepted as part of that totality, because in one life no human soul can reach perfection. So illusion then comes from our physical environment. If we insist that what is real has to be touched and known by our physical sensibilities, then we're in the illusionary world. But as soon as we reverse that and look internally as to who we are and perceive on the inner lines of our being who we are, then that means the soul has awakened to its inner life. This philosophy does not give us this information that eventually, when absorbed, becomes knowledge, because it is not external, it is internal to each human being. There is an imperishable part of the heart that is imprinted at the beginning of each manvantara, and each human soul carries that knowledge internally to themselves without ever being aware of it being there. But when it is awakened, then it gives the possibility of the human soul, its principles, and what it can actually achieve. So there is the man of flesh and there is the man of spirit, and that we called the higher triad, which is the spirit, the spiritual soul, which we put at the beginning, and mind entity. So these three constitute the higher triad, which is the individuality that goes from life to life. So as long as the double man knows that there is a man of flesh and a man of spirit, and keeps within the law of that the spiritual continuity, so long as the divine spark lingers him, which we read in the voice of the silence, he is on the road to an immortality in a future state. The secret doctrine teaches that man, if he means immortality, will remain forever that trinity. We come and we go. We come and we go. But once perfected, that coming is not compulsory. That coming becomes a sacrificial effort in order to inform those who are left behind, who are not aware of these truths. So those heroes and all of the well-known individualities that come belong to the same brotherhood, who come as saviors to enlighten human beings so that they can also follow in this path. The body then is the most grossly materialistic aspect of us, and at death then these principles separate.
Wait. You quick with that eraser.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. You keep on going. That's okay.
Sorry. Okay, what happens at death? These principles separate. The physical body is pronounced dead, but it takes actually quite a long time for the inner principles to separate from that physical body. That is why it is extremely important not to cry or show real emotion around people who are trying to depart from the earth plane, because they're involved inner aspects of that journey returning towards home. Once the physical body is separated, it means that the astral body has also separated. This is a bit misleading because it is this body is ethereal and it's not really substantial like the physical, but everywhere in the literature it says it stays really close to the physical body at death until its molecular constitution also disintegrates, and then it goes to its own plane of being electromagnetic. But it takes a long time for that dissipation to occur. Excuse me. So once this occurs, the Kamaloka is where the passions and desires go. These are all principles, by the way. They're substantial. Passions and desires go to this sphere, and then after that dissipates, only then is the higher triad free to go to Devakan or heaven, as the general terminology goes. But this is the terminology which is heaven of the theological world, Devakan. So all these principles then have to separate from one another in order for that entity, the individuality, to go to a rest period. Let's see what else we should cover. Okay. The secret doctrine does not concede immortality to all men alike. As much as we would like for everyone to have that, it will not happen. Only through the highest purity and chastity we shall approach nearer to God and receive in the contemplation of Him the true knowledge and insight, writes Porphyry. If the human soul has neglected during its lifetime to receive its illumination from its divine spirit, then it becomes difficult for the gross and sensual man to survive for a great length of time his physical death. This affected this student a lot because there is that belief that the human soul is going to be enabled to go to this rest period. But if the person was really materialistic, totally wicked, from one life to the next, and it continued on that path, what happens eventually is that that light, that the core separates itself from the human soul, and this is what is being expressed here. This, as I said, was a very sad thing to read, but it nevertheless does occur. If this ray is allowed to be more and more shut out by the thickening crust of matter, the soul, once freed from the body, follows its earthly attraction and magnetically is drawn to the material atmosphere. So it really cannot go anywhere else but stay around Earth. It will not have that rest period in heaven or Devakan. It will stay around Earth, and it will immediately be reborn without a period of rest, because it has absolutely no spiritual attraction left in it for that sphere, so it is cut from it. By doing what it did, it cut itself. It says, the viability of the astral form is feeble because its particles cannot cohere firmly when once it has slipped out of the unyielding capsule of the external body. Its particles gradually obeying the disorganizing attraction of the universal space, finally fly asunder beyond the possibility of reaggregation. Upon the occurrence of such a catastrophe, the individual ceases to exist. So, in the Secret Doctrine and in all of the writings, 3 sheaths of the soul are explained. We said Buddhi is a spiritual soul. Manas is the human soul. And then there is an astral soul, which we talked about today. But what happens at death is that the lower mind, which is our intellectual mind, and this body coalesces. And that is why it's called a soul. And so the individuality is that light. We talked about it a little bit before, but it's depicted this way. This, in the Secret Doctrine, is in the proem and indicates beginning of an activity session. In other words, Mahapralaya is the rest period, and then Manvantara would be the activity period. And at the beginning of that period, all of the individualities that are there are then sent out this way. It's just like looking at the sun and looking at these rays. So each ray representing a human soul, and this is called the central spiritual sun in the Secret Doctrine. The physical sun representing an opening into that reality which is behind it at the archetypal level, but this is what it is said. So once that affinity of the human soul is cut off from its spiritual aspect, it then finds itself in Earth's atmosphere and it is cut off. After death, says Proclus, the soul, the spirit, continues to linger in the aerial body, which is the astral, till it is entirely purified from all angry and voluptuous passions, and then it goes through a second dying. Now, having said this, and I have run out of time, but let us say this too. Each human being has 7 sheaths, or 7 levels of consciousness, Secret Doctrine, which correspond to 7 levels of the physical constitution of the cosmos. We are represented as the microcosmic aspect of it. Now, in the Secret Doctrine, on page 289 to 290, Secret Doctrine 1, she gives us in those extracts 49 levels of consciousness, meaning that each 7 then is subdivided again into another 7, giving us 49 levels of fire, which is representative of 49 levels of consciousness in the human being. So when you read these articles, you have to understand that the astral body is made up of 7 levels, and in each purification, it leaves the outer level or layer of its existence to dissipate and removes itself to a higher level of consciousness. And once the 7 is disintegrated, then the rest of the stuff takes place. Let's see. Yeah. When the astral body is at rest during the sleeping period, the physical body is totally impervious to what is going on around it at night. But the astral soul is alive during that period, because in the article that Mr. Judge wrote, it says that it oozes out of the physical, and it is free to a certain degree to travel. However, the same article says in most of us, this travel does not really take place, that the astral body remains very close to its physical aspect. But once that it does reach that possibility of travel, it communicates with what? The stars. It is made up of star dust, and it communicates with the stars because it is made of the same material. So sometimes we wake up in the morning, we have dreams, forebodings, presentiments, and impressions left in us, and we don't know exactly where we got them. Or you go somewhere and you see a scenery and you think to yourself, wow, I have been here before, but I just don't remember how I could have been here, because I haven't been to Switzerland before. But the scene that you see is very alive in your mind. Or you meet someone and you know them. What do you think those are? Perhaps some of it is related to this travel at night, that we go to places and we communicate, but we don't remember when we're awake, because the brain does not remember what the astral brain was doing during that period of time. I'm sorry, this is very limited what we said, but I've run out of time, so I'll open it for questions, and then perhaps we'll finish it off as we answer the questions. Yes?
Could that memory also be linked to a prior life as well as the astral travel during the current life?
Ordinarily, HPV says that we do not remember what we did in the previous lives, because if you have not established continuity of consciousness, you won't be able to remember. Continuity of consciousness has to be established. When does that occur? At death you have a vision and you see all that you did in this life. But when you're coming into incarnation, it also shows you why you're coming in. The soul is here to do a particular work, and it knows what its duty is, but it's the personality. Once we're in this physical body, the personality interferes with the objectives of the inner man.
Also, depths have continuous continuity, right?
Well, so can you. When do you have it? When the buddhi and manas become one. When they join together. Buddhi is wisdom, it's a spiritual soul, but it is also wisdom. It has that light that it shines on the higher mind, and it shows you everything you need to know about everything. But also during that process, slowly you remember your previous lives. Those gifts come as a natural outcome of this process. But until such time, it means that we're not really capable of addressing what we did in the previous lives, so we don't know them. How do you know what we were doing? How would we react to it if you knew that would affect your life as is today? So it is protective in a sense. It does not allow you to know what you did. But what happens at the end of life is that the Sutratman, another term, which is the individuality, but is also referred to as the Sutratman, the thread that binds all incarnations together. It is explained that on this thread, each mortal life is recorded, but not all of it. The mortal life that has spiritual tendencies, those are the only thing that is retained, because the higher triad is not of this plane. It does not belong to earth. It is of spirit. So anything that is similar to its nature is on that thread. So it keeps from each life its highest aspirations, the things that are similar to its nature. And she says you can look at them as beads strung on this thread. The aroma, she calls it in the secret doctrine, of each earth life then is retained on this thread, which is our individuality. So the individuality knows, it's the all-knower. It knows where we have been, it knows what we have done, it knows why we are here and what we are supposed to do. I think in the theological sense, it's called the Father. But this Father is not in heaven. This Father is in each astral heart. I'll put here human heart. But it's not the physical we're talking about. It's the most ethereal of the 7 levels, which retains all the memory of each life. So if we were to access it, we would know it too. At a certain point, we will know it also. Yes?
When the embryo is growing, is the quaternary present before birth?
In the growing embryo is the quaternary present. The embryo is developing on the form of the astral. So the astral form, which is organized electrons, serves as the model body for the developing embryo. The lower quaternary is astral body, physical body, passions and desires, and what's the other one? Jiva. Okay, the astral body is there, correct? Because the molecular construction of the body is taking place. The physical body is developing, but the passions and desires are what? The skandhas, which were left from the previous life. When do you think that it should incarnate in this baby? When it is obviously born. At 7 months, it's viable. HPV says in the article that this student read, it is at 7 years that the monastic entity takes total control of that physical body. 7 years old. So the mind, even though it's probably rudimentarily there, it does not control, because even in the religious circles, a child becomes responsible for their actions at 7 years of age. So at that time, it's there, but the jiva, which is prana, the baby breathes how? Through the umbilical cord, right? Nutrition, air, all that is given by the mother, and it has 2 veins and 2 arteries, but they reverse that function at birth. The veins become the arteries, and the arteries are actually doing the work of the veins. So the process is reversed at birth. But it is there because the embryo has what? Amniotic fluid. And the amniotic fluid gets everything that it requires cosmically through the mother's body. But all of the influences come through that fluidic essence that the egg had in it to start with. It's not from the external, it's internal to itself.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes?
Since after birth, the child functions with the astral body of also the mother, and does not is not autonomous. The child is not yet autonomous.
It is autonomous in the sense that it breathes,
Yes.
it eats, and it has it's a separate entity.
Yeah.
But for its welfare, it's dependent on the mother
Okay.
to support it
Yeah.
nutritionally, psychologically, to enable it to grow to a functional level.
Okay.
Yes.
There are cases in which there's another caretaker, could be a grandparent, that would make a connection with that caretaker. And what happens to orphans who do not have like that care and are growing in facilities?
As a toddler, at the first stages
Yeah,
of
the first 7 years, what happens? There's no, that human being not connecting with another, with the caregiver.
Well, the writings specifically say that the environment has a tremendous significance in the growing child's welfare. But it does not mean that that baby cannot readjust itself to its environment once that it is able to do so. Because remember, the mind is going to take root at 7. It's there rudimentarily, but it is more or less reflex action that takes place. There's no thinking, right? But remember, who's occupying that body? Who's occupying this body? The soul has been around. It's an old soul coming into a new birth. You have to look at it that way, because sometimes the fetus is not viable. Why do you think the soul leaves? Because the environment is not suitable for it to occupy it, and it just leaves. It changes its mind, and it's going to have a different incarnation. So you have to look at the incarnating soul. That baby is not helpless. In the physical aspect of it is, but on the inner lines of its being, it's a soul. It's coming into incarnation, and what else? It knows what it is coming to do. In this writing, the soul chooses the mother and where it is going to incarnate, because the environment that is going to be provided is necessary for its welfare. Sometimes the soul takes really trying, poor circumstances unto itself to learn a lesson that it needs to learn, or it comes to give an example to the others. So you have to look at the baby as an incarnating soul. That soul has been in and out of incarnation for 1 million years in this 5th sub alone. So it's a very long time that we come and go, we come and go. Yeah. Well, if there are no other questions, I have something to tell you. It says here that it has been research done on how to heal by using colors. And the pioneers have found that colors actually can bring about health. For instance, it says a black room is very useful for insomniacs and violent patients, and other colors have their specific psychological effects. And so, why do you think that would be the case? Why do you think colors would bring about healing in human beings, which, by the way, in the olden days, it used to be used. Music and colors were used for healing purposes in the temples of old, because at that time, the hierophants and the priests of the temples knew the astral body and all the rest of the constituent parts of the human soul, and they knew how to bring about the desired change in the astral form so that the physical body then would heal itself as well. It says here, the electromagnetic nature of light has been scientifically recognized since Clerk Maxwell, and H.P.V. writes about it in The Secret Doctrine. Both emotions and disease being seated in the astral, which is itself electromagnetic, why should not these variant light have some effect on it? It says that it will be one day recognized that each color has a necessary correlation of vibrations with the subdivisions of the astral body. Then a new era of healing will begin. So we said that Jiva feeds the astral body, and that is life essence. So the colors then correlate to subdivisions of the astral soul or body. What are the colors? The visible spectrum red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. These are the subdivisions of our astral body, according to this article. Because light, the white light, when put through a prism, shows those colors in it. So we are made of electromagnetic, invisible but substantial astral body that correlates with all these colors, and the light that feeds it has all these colors in it. So anyone who sees the aura of a human being would be able to perceive what colors constitute the majority of that aura, and what, if we know what these colors represent in the physical body, then we would know which principle was in ascendance in those human beings. Because all of our sheaths correspond, like the mind has a color, does it not? It does. The Buddhi has a color. All these are color represent.
And these correspond to chakras, right? The colors.
Yes.
To the chakra system, the 7 in your body.
She never talks about the chakras, so I'm not an authority on the chakras, but generally, obviously, that has to be true also. Since the student doesn't know anything about chakras, I can't give it to you. But in the general terminology, it is given this way.
Yeah.
And obviously, there is a center that correlates to that particular functioning of that sheath. This student doesn't know that.
And it ties to the sounds.
Sorry?
This ties to the sounds. There are sacred
Yes,
sounds.
vibration.
Yeah.
Sound is vibration.
Geometry.
vibration.
geometry for each of those.
Geometry means geometrical form,
Yeah, patterns, yeah.
and so sound and vibration is what causes the form to come about. Okay.
Yes, so red being the base, the lowest sound, lowest number of vibrations. And
Correct. The red being the lowest and the
I
violet
guess
being
is
the highest. But this is the visible spectrum. If you look at the spectrum, there's a whole bunch after the violet, and there's a stuff below red too.
What we
But
don't see.
our retina does not acknowledge those because we don't have the ability to see it. But what does HPV tell us in the voice of the silence? She says that once the inner man is active and we're attuned to it, we can quieten the physical senses and we can see with our invisible senses, the ones that are in the astral body, because the real sense organs do not belong to the physical body. They're just simply there to gather information from our world. But the real organs are in the astral body. We said it has its nervous system, it has its vascular system, and it is the repository of our emotions and disease. So this is where we need to look at for the real on the inside. And once we constitute our being as the seven on the inner lines, then we have synthesized this in us, and we can see on all levels. So we are aware on the red, orange, yellow, which are not the case, which is not the case with the mediums. They only see partially on maybe one. I'm not quite sure how that works, but in order to get a real understanding and the real constitution and its characteristic or what we're concentrating the mind on, we have to be able to find the correlation of all these different colors. We are all partial at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.